IoT product are produced in the country itself. You know, they are even importing from China. Everybody knows that. But if we think about China and Senegal, so China is importing much, doesn't import most of the equipment, and if they are making pressure on those who are producing devices, I think that it is very important for them. But what is important here is to protect, to be protected from the imported product. So the problem is not the same, and the Senegal should have its own solution. So we have two viewpoints when it comes to security of IoT. The first one is the internal security or inward-oriented security. So we want to protect the owner of the IoT. If you have a smart TV back home, we want to protect you. We want to protect you against Google that maybe is trying to spy on you on your own house. You are the one that we want to protect. The second standpoint is about the external security or outward oriented security, which is kind of less.
Elle est peut-être plus importante. Parce que votre télévision intelligente peut avoir un impact négatif sur le reste de l'Internet. C'est ce qui s'est passé en 2016. Les gens qui ont ces IoT, ces objets Internet, peut-être eux, ça ne s'est rien passé chez eux, mais ils ont bloqué l'Internet. Donc, votre télévision peut-être, si il est hacké, ça ne vous cause pas beaucoup de problèmes, mais ça peut bloquer l'Internet au Sénégal. Est-ce que ça, c'est pas un problème? C'est un problème. Il faut s'en occuper. Donc, ce que nous faisons à ce sujet, l'Internet Society travaille pour un meilleur Internet. Comme j'ai dit tout à l'heure, nous voulons un Internet ouvert, globalement connecté, sécurisé et fiable. Et pour que ça soit fiable, par exemple, il faut que les gens se sentent que leur vie privée est protégée et ils se sentent sécurisés. Je ne veux pas, ma fille joue avec une poupée, elle est en danger. Parce que maintenant, il y a des poupées qui sont connectées, qui répondent aux questions des petites filles, mais qui en même temps peuvent être des dangers pour les petites filles. Nous voulons que les fabricants et les fournisseurs d'appareils et de services IoT grand public adoptent des lignes directrices en matière de sécurité et de confidentialité afin de protéger Internet et les consommateurs contre les cybermenaces. Donc, ce n'est pas, j'ai trop parlé peut-être de problèmes, mais il y a aussi des solutions. Et quelquefois, des solutions sont très simples, théoriquement. Le problème, c'est de les implémenter. Je vais juste vous dire, donner un exemple de problème qui est très simple à résoudre si on s'y met dessus. La plupart, l'un des, comment on dit ça, l'un des problèmes avec la plupart des objets Internet, c'est qu'ils sont envoyés, qu'ils sont vendus avec des mots de passe standards. Par exemple, admin. Donc, nom d'utilisateur admin, mot de passe admin. Est-ce que vous pensez que quand quelqu'un met cette caméra ici, il pense à changer le mot de passe? Il y a très peu de chances. Donc, qu'est-ce qui se passe? Il se passe que attaquer cette caméra, si elle est connectée, est très simple. Je vais juste essayer de mot de passe. Donc, quelle serait la solution? La solution serait de ne pas avoir de mot de passe standard, ce qui semble simple. Mais comment on peut forcer ça? C'est l'une des choses que, par exemple, le régulateur peut forcer. Il peut dire, on ne peut pas importer l'équipement qui a ce problème. Maintenant, il faut savoir, ça c'est juste un exemple, mais il y a d'autres exemples. Et nous, ce qu'on essaie en train de promouvoir, c'est confiance dès la conception. Souvent, on pense à la confiance de Internet une fois qu'on a des problèmes. Mais si vous avez des objets Internet qui sont envoyés, qui sont vendus avec ce mot de passe standard, est-ce qu'il est facile?
Easy to change that once they are mounted or once they are sold? No, it is quite impossible. So what we can do that before, I mean, during the design, we can, I forget his name. What was your name again, sir? Mr. Usman. Mr. Usman, I'm going to tell you that you have the right to sell, but you have to make sure that the device you are selling is of that quality, is of a good quality. So during the design, is going to be concerned about security. That is how it should work. And that's what we want to promote here in Senegal and also in some other countries, to work with the manufacturers and the providers so that we can put in place that reliability framework. I'm not going to talk about the reliability framework, but there is a framework in which we have to work, and which were made by an association organization inside Internet Society, which is called ODA. So mobilize the consumers to improve that security and that confidentiality, because the consumer is very important. If so, we have to sensitize the consumers so that they can require that. Make sure also that the policies and the regulations think about those problems of security and the confidentiality. I'm not to go into the nitty-gritty of these problems. So this is the Online Trust Alliance, which was a framework developed on what is going to be done about IoT security, and it affects a certain number of things that should be checked. But we have earlier the collective responsibility. So these are about the providers, the distribution channel, the decision makers, and the government, the test organization, and the consumer himself. We have also to reinforce sensitizing. We want them to know the risks for the security of people. So as you can see there, we have a puppet. It looks like just a simple puppet, but the puppet is connected. So I have a video. I have it is a formal version of my presentation. The second video, maybe I'm going to prepare that. It is a good one too, but I will going to show it if we can use the internet.
Ça ne marche pas. Il n'est pas connecté. D'accord. Peut-être tout à l'heure.
We are not connected. Maybe later on, I'm going to try to prepare that. We have two videos that shows the problem. Work with the decision makers. You want the political decision makers to create that political environment which is going to foster some solid options of security and the confidentiality. And as I've said a bit earlier, it sounds like a problem for the future, but actually it is not. And I think that the biggest responsibility here for the government, and I am happy that we have some of you that come from the ministries and even from administration anyways. So you have to think about what is going to happen in a couple of years. So today I am aware that there are some discussions on a law on the tech news, and we had trying to find a solution, just a very quick solution, but it might not be the good solution. So here also, maybe today we cannot see the problems in themselves, but we cannot see the problems every day. But with this wisdom of technoculture, it is possible that in 1 year or 2 years, these problems are going to be current, and we're not going to wait for Senegal to be paralyzed to do that. We know that it's going to happen, and we know that we will have a big problem. Unfortunately, this is the case in different fields. I don't know about Senegal, but I know back home in my place, I know that there was not much which was done about electricity. Then we wake up one day and we realize that we do not have enough electricity, and we needed 10 years to make up for the delay. So while there are some problems that are going to come in, so the solution, we had to thought about it 10 years ago. And this is the same thing here. We have to think about today, because with the speed in which things are changing, the problem is going to be a big one in a couple of years. Senegal is going to be a pioneer in this field. This is also our concern. This is also our concern, or this is our problem, because most of the time we wait for people from Europe or United States to find the solution for us to adopt that. But what is the disadvantage of this? The disadvantage is that we are going to be just the consumers, and they're going to be the sellers or the vendors of that. Why can't we try, we the Africans, why can't we try to be the one giving the solutions to the others? Now we have all those, between them and us, the difference for the knowledge are very small, and we can even make up for that small delay. But we have to use the problem as as an opportunity. Good morning. My name is Mamoudou Saradek. I'm from the Ministry of Justice. I just have some questions, because when I listen to you talking about security on the Internet of Things. The microphone is not working. Try to find a way just to stop them. This is what I think about the I would like to say that it is time for the coffee break. So understand that the internet is the main source so that we can do right. There is cases also it is for us to put in place some standards to filter, to control the object on our network, to make sure that we can make some restrictions that can help us to know what is the object coming in, what is the goal for that object, how can we control it in case there are some shortcomings when it comes to the security. Thank you for that clarification. Actually, when we're talking about the Internet of Things, I'm not saying that we are going to check just this camera and then we are going to have a solution. That's not what I mean, actually. The problem comes from the fact that maybe we have this camera, but the solution might even not be at the level of the camera. So it is a problem, and you remember the first levels that I was talking about, or the three dimensions. So this is a global problem, and it's much more complicated than that. We have to find some solutions for this problem. Actions for the decision makers. So they can guide the market, they can increase the responsibility and support the adoption by the industry of the principles for best practices. So this is just a list of things that you could do at a I don't know, individual level to inside your organization. So I will leave the presentation behind, and if you want, you can go through it. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm sorry for having been long, but I think that it was very important to talk about all this. Thank you. So just before we go to the coffee break, I just have two words to say. Just to say thanks to David for that instructional approach. He has talked about the main concerns. I think that many of you have some questions that you want to ask. Maybe we are going to keep them, and later on we'll try to find a way to come back on those questions, and especially what the last speaker who was talking about why we don't to take into consideration the source. And I think it is something which is obvious. If you solve the problem at the source, it will be solved everywhere. But the thing is that everything is connecting to everything. Is a source. It is the one who want to communicate that want the ability to communicate. And we don't. Sometimes we need the possibility to come back on this. Thank you very much. We are going to enjoy the coffee break, and maybe we have some energies. I suggest that we're going to have 20-minute break, and we come back in 20 minutes, which means 11:30. Everybody back here, or 11:40. So 11:40, we all come back here. Thank you very much.
Oui, alors, pour les histoires de bagages là, hein, d'accord, est-ce que tout est fermé? On est sûr? Voilà, tout est fermé ici. Bon, rangez quand même vos bagages. Oui. Si. Si.
réguler, tandis que les utilisateurs disent que c'est pour on peut restreindre ou bien toucher à la neutralité de l'Internet. Quel est votre avis là-dessus?
Oui, d'abord, je dois d'abord commencer par dire que dans ce genre de situation un peu complexe, chacun peut dire qu'il a raison et chacun peut sortir des arguments. Mais le fond de l'affaire, c'est que, comme d'habitude, dans nos pays, on ne fait pas de prospective. On ne regarde pas les choses longtemps à l'avance. Suffisamment à l'avance, vous avez tous vécu ça avec nous. On a vu dans les médias Internet, notamment dans les sites Internet, depuis de longues années, ça ne date pas d'hier, depuis de longues années, on a vu le comportement des gens sur les chats sur Internet. Les gens s'insultent, les gens sortent des informations pour attaquer d'autres, sans que même les médias eux-mêmes doivent être le premier censeur, le premier régulateur, avant même que la question ne devienne globale. Donc, pour me résumer là-dessus, pour moi, le véritable problème, c'est le manque d'anticipation sur ces questions complexes. Il faut désormais que nous voyons les choses arriver, anticiper, les discuter pour trouver les bonnes solutions. Si on attend au dernier moment que, par exemple, au niveau de l'État, l'État décide dans l'urgence, quelquefois, de prendre des mesures, à la fois des mesures législatives, mais bien évidemment, les organismes de consommateurs, notamment dans ce cas, se sont levés pour défendre des intérêts bien compris et tout à fait légitimes des consommateurs, parce que l'Internet, c'est également quelque chose d'ouvert. Moi, je ne peux pas payer ma connexion Internet chez l'opérateur, d'accord, et me voir restreindre la façon de l'utiliser. Alors que moi, je ne fais rien de mal. S'il y a peut-être d'autres gens qui font du mal, mais on n'a qu'à traquer ces gens-là. Mais on ne peut pas empêcher la très grande majorité de la population de pouvoir utiliser WhatsApp, de pouvoir utiliser Instagram, de pouvoir utiliser Facebook, mais tranquillement, mais parce qu'ils sont dans un fonctionnement tout à fait normal. Il ne faut pas que les quelques brebis galeuses mais pénalisent l'ensemble du pays, puisque ce dont on est en train de parler, c'est également quelque chose qui peut paralyser, y compris l'économie. Le gouvernement a tout à fait le droit, et c'est son rôle, de protéger les citoyens, de protéger toute la population, de protéger la sécurité du pays, mais dans le même temps, il faut aussi prendre en compte les effets néfastes que cela peut avoir sur la population et sur l'économie. Donc pour moi, c'est véritablement un problème assez complexe, mais encore une fois, il faut qu'on apprenne de ces situations pour que demain, avant que ce genre de situation, ce genre de problèmes compliqués n'arrivent, mais qu'on les devance, qu'on éduque les gens, qu'on prenne les mesures préalables avant d'arriver à des situations complexes.
Donc, à partir de l'adoption de ce nouveau code, on peut dire que la neutralité de l'Internet prendra un sacré coup sous nos yeux.
La neutralité de l'Internet, c'est une question complexe. Ce que je veux dire par là et que j'ai essayé d'expliquer simplement, si demain, pour des raisons de sécurité, on empêche les Sénégalais de pouvoir utiliser WhatsApp ou, comme je l'ai dit, Facebook ou tout autre réseau social, parce que je considère que la grande majorité des Sénégalais, la très grande majorité des Sénégalais utilisent ces outils de façon tout à fait correcte. Ce n'est pas parce qu'il y a quelques brebis galeuses que justement, on va empêcher à ces Sénégalais de pouvoir utiliser l'Internet de façon ouverte et libre. Enfin, ce que je veux dire là-dessus, c'est que on verra ce qui va se passer. Le gouvernement prend des mesures, mais il n'est pas sûr, peut-être qu'il n'est pas sûr qu'on se retrouve dans des situations, mais qu'il faille les exécuter. Et on verra. Mais en tout cas, tout le monde doit rester vigilant, mais pour que la liberté des uns et des autres puisse être protégée dans le cadre d'une sécurité nationale bien comprise. Mais voilà, l'objectif des démarches multi-acteurs, c'est justement ce que je disais tout à l'heure. C'est qu'aujourd'hui, dans le monde, on ne peut plus prendre de décisions qui concernent tout le monde sans les avoir consultés, mais sans avoir discuté. Un processus multi-acteur, c'est en gros de dire que pour toutes les questions essentielles, il faut que la société civile, l'État, les secteurs privés, les consommateurs, on va dire toutes les organisations qui sont structurées, mais se mettent ensemble pour discuter des questions essentielles de manière à trouver des solutions consensuelles. Voilà, c'est ça le concept de la démarche multi-acteur.
Justement, vous l'avez souligné tout à l'heure, la plateforme Facebook est la première plateforme sociale utilisée dans le monde. Aujourd'hui, il y a des fake news. Facebook est en train de lutter contre ces fake news-là. Quelle lecture en faites-vous? Mais
c'est naturel. Tout le monde doit lutter contre les fake news. Je l'ai dit au départ, ce sont les éditeurs de systèmes, les sites des journaux publics, les sites sur Internet, les sites qui publient de l'information, les réseaux sociaux. Ce sont ces sites-là qui, les premiers, doivent être les régulateurs, doivent contrôler l'information pour la filtrer avant même qu'elle ne fasse, que cette information ne fasse des dégâts. Donc, c'est normal. Si Facebook le fait, d'ailleurs, ils ont été poursuivis récemment, en tout cas interpellés, y compris en Europe, pour se justifier sur le fait que certaines informations aient été dérobées. Mais c'est à eux aussi de faire la toilette dans leur système pour éviter que justement ces Facebook, ces fake news, n'inondent le système d'information dont nous avons tous besoin pour nous instruire, pour nous éduquer et pour échanger tout simplement. Mohamed Tidiane Seck.
Sëñ Seck tey ñuy waxtaane projet de la 28/2018 commission technique bi xool na ko samedi ba le passé tey dañ koy adopté mu nekk loo xam ne utilisateurs yi nee nañ bu amee neutralité internet maanaam internet daal jëfandikoo ko ni mu neexee yow mi moom sa internet dootul mën a nekk.
waaw li may jëkk wax mooy mbir yu mel nii su amee li tax mu am c'est que ñun dañuy xaar ba yëf yi ñi këtt ñi jon comme ni ñuy wax ñu soxlay jóg alors que lii yëpp yàgg nañ ko gis bu yàgg ci at yu bare ci gannaaw gis nañu ci journaux internet yi nit ñaa ngi ciy saaga nit ñaa ngi ciy wone yoo xam ni naka sudul noonu la te jëluñu mesures yi pour aar loolu nag suñ ko deful lu mel nii moo ñuy dal dañuy xaar ba ca njëlbeen ba nga xam ne léegi nag gouvernement bi jël na décision ñëpp ku nekk taxaw donc ci gouvernement bi ci boppam sax la war jëkki mooy problème su fekkee ne am séentu ni nit mën na am dañuy jël temps waxtaan teg ñëpp waxtaan seeg association yi waxtaan seeg journalistes yi waxtaan seeg régulateurs yi waxtaan seeg kilifa yi muy kilifa diine di kilifa aada waxtaan ka ci école yi dal di yee xale yi aar ñëpp suñu waxtaanee ba pare ba ñëpp xam ni mbir mi lan la su boobaa gouvernement bi su jëlee décision day nekk lu yomb lu leer.
loolu mooy jàngat bi ci def.
loolu mooy jàngat bi mais nag li am léegi maintenant li am léegi mooy mesure bi suñ ko jëlee ñun nañu toog rek di seetaan nan la nar demee mais li wóor ba wóor mooy Sénégal nit ñi ñu ngi fi ñu ngi utiliser WhatsApp di téléphoner ci dëkk bi ci bitim réew te internet rek la ñuy fay ñu ngi utiliser Facebook ñëpp xam nañu Sénégal yi ni ñu buggee Facebook ak ni ñu koy utiliser ñëpp xam nañu Sénégal yi ni ñu utiliser de manière générale daal li ñuy wax les réseaux sociaux pour jokkalante ci seen biir loolu nag yelleef la moom la ñuy wax liberté la Sénégal bi daf ko am ba pare maintenant gouvernement bi naam dafa war aar ñëpp kenn bëggul ñu saaga la kenn bëggul ñu wax la lu bon loolu donc seen rôle la ñu aar nit ñëpp ci loolu wante nag lii jafe mooy sooy aar ñii def naka sutul noonu maanaam barewuñu ñooñu nag walu ñu yàqal Sénégal yi nga xam ni ci seen majorité ñoom li ñu bëgg mooy utiliser internet ci jàmm waaw loolu ñii dañ ko bëgg def ci jàmm am ñu tuuti ñoo xam ni ñoom gilaawaale rek la ñu indi léegi nag gouvernement bi rôle am mooy seet nan lay càmbar nan lay yemale loolu ba ku nekk mën en tout cas daal ñi nga xam ne ñoom li leen yëkkati mooy utiliser internet ak réseaux sociaux yi ci jàmm ñooñu daal ñoo war gañe waaw.
merci monsieur jërëjëf.
Puisque c'est un pôle. Ouais, je règle ça.
your the TV, but at the same time your phone. If we say that in the audience, 100% of the people who are here are connected and are transmitting regularly information, especially the geolocalization, and all those information are correct with the communication. We have to admit that there is a problem of security. This is one thing, but what we obliged to say, the connected object is a reality in our country. And one of the first object connected that we can talk about is not a complex object or of new generation. It's just simply a smartphone. The network to which the object is connected is not a network connected specifically. It is internet, the general public internet. I will start with the end saying IoT in Senegal is a reality. We have here cameras that are connected. We have telephones permanently sending information. We have smart objects that are delivering services and using the same information. What we're going to try to see in this presentation is to come back on the definition of the characteristic of IoT and see the reality in Senegal. Don't hesitate to stop me during the presentation. I prefer interactivity. The outline of the presentation is set on two main points. The first one is definition or presentation of what is IoT. We will come back on some of the concepts presented by David Bekele, giving some examples, before coming to something which is more specific, which is our context, our framework. First of all, the definition, the general definition that you can find in Wikipedia, even if it's not the more formal definition, it is an global infrastructure for the society of information that enable to have evolved services interconnecting objects, physical or virtual, thanks to technologies of information and communication. Those objects are supposed to be interoperable, be them existing or in an evolution status, which means that through IoT, we should see the object itself, but also we should see the infrastructure. The infrastructure are the technical means used to facilitate the communication between the objects. But we should also the service aspect, which is provided or consumed by the object. We should consider that the object is not always physical. It can be a virtual body, which is in an application. Now, this set can be structured in different layers. A layer where you can talk about the network, which is the most apparent part, be it internet in the sense of global network, or the technology used by or any network used for the communication of between objects. It's also the all the services that can be used within that structure. We can also talk about the different services that are doing just integration. I have 2 blocks that are doing data processing after collection, but the integration of those elements is a service to be taken into account in the service of internet. That's why we consider integration in itself is one aspect or one layer, important layer of the process. And then we have how to access, that is the connectivity part. There also we have a set of services and techniques, protocol and technology that have a wide range, middle or short range. At different scales, objects should communicate, process data locally, be it locally or. And then we have the physical object, most of the time identified as a sensor, which enable the production or the capturing data. And then we have all the identification mechanism which enable to analyze, identify the flows of data. When we talk about IoT, we're talking about the set of all those elements. In our case, with the telephone, we can see the cell phone in itself is an object, but within it there is an application which uses our data and which transmit them. The object we're using is not the phone, is the application who is sending data, which is working as a sensor. We have an identification system which is not ours. Maybe we are using the identification of Google. We using connectivity offered by an operator. And at the level of the cloud, there are services of integration of data. Behind all this infrastructure, the nature of services that can be offered are various. They are heterogeneous and they are vast. That they can be services of the industrial domain. They can be used in health, transport, insurance, etc. Let's take the example of health. We have nowadays, we have bracelets that are connected, which enable to measure our heart frequency. We have one in the public. Can you use the microphone, please, the speaker? Let's take this kind of service. They are entitled to collect information on a patient and to process them and send them to a medical service. This is a reality in our country, but it's a reality which is considered as uncontrolled, as it is the case in many of our contexts. In our context, oftentimes, the use has come before the framework. I'm going to of our smart cities. The definition of the need of a smart city and the interest that we have on the higher level of technology to be integrated with the possibility to interconnect all buildings, have surveillance cameras, has preceded the framework in which these different services have to evolve and the use which is made of those services. Smart city in Dakar, in Senegal, it's a reality. Services such as Hello is a reality. Tracking systems in the transport system are realities also in our country. But all this, it does not start today and will not end tomorrow. IoT is a concept which is in permanent evolution with the technologies on object and technology that are in permanent evolution. In our stores, we use already. We are using RFID or NFA. Those are taxis that we have in supermarket in clothes. With those that tag, you can identify the shirt and to integrate those information in our information system. Nowadays, those different tags can be used for something else. A cloth can be put in a washing machine. When you read the tag, you can know to which temperature can you wash the cloth. And whenever our means allow us to do it, we use those kind of objects. Other objects will refer to a whole infrastructure which is connected. It's not just the objects. We have ID cards that are integrating cards that can be read from a reader, which is supposed to be connected. The reality of the connected object would go further than that, because we have every day this object in our pocket and we have all our information within it. If you have a reader, personal reader, which what prevent him to have those information? We need to have a layer of security. We need to protect the information in the card. We need to protect the mechanism we have we are accessing. Today is RFID, but within 2 years, the mechanisms, identification mechanism of sharing data, access to information will change. So the reality of the object connected is not just a fixed reality, it's a reality in a permanent movement in which we should integrate a vision which enables us to say you can be project on technologies we know through a regulatory framework, but what to do work evolves. So I'm asked to save the presentation on a flash drive. I'm sorry, it's going to take some time. Right now, because there are some people who are following the presentation online. These different technologies that are evolving in time need an adapted framework, but also evolving, sorry. These different technology I was talking about are functioning at different levels. We can have mechanism working on a wide range. We have lower norm. object can communicate on a frequency band freely without any license, and anyone can make, develop, and deploy and use an object which will use that technology without a need of a specific license because of frequency band with which the object is entitled to communicate. Others do. Can we give the floor, the microphone to the speaker of the room, please? In Senegal, what we ask is to declare the use of the frequency band, but there is no requirement of license. It requires a license for one reason, one simple reason, which is factual. A year ago, with a colleague, we did an experimentation for 3 months. We set tens of CFOC antenna in Senegal. We were obliged to have an authorization of ARTP, and we stopped the project at the end of these 3 months because you were offering a service. No, we were just under, I'm not talking about the authorization of the service, but the use of the frequency band is not free in Senegal, service, be it service or not. I'm at IFTP. You have to know that the bands we are talking about, and they are what you call ESM bands. They are free to use, but at certain conditions, especially Wi-Fi. We are talking about mechanism of weak range or mid range. For this use, used in certain conditions, weak power and weak range. Those are the bands that are used by Wi-Fi. If you have a Wi-Fi at home using 4G or 5G, at the international level, at UT, the bands that are used in an industrial or scientific should follow a certain number of requirements. If you are in those authorizations, you are free to use it. If you respect those weak power and that weak range, this is defined by RTP and at the international level by UUT. But if you go beyond, does it mean that if they go beyond a certain distance, it is necessary to have an authorization following for known reasons or microphone, please. Micro, s'il vous plaît. Now also let's say it requires a type of authorization. If I have two objects that need to use LoRa and one object here and another one on top, can I use LoRa at home without license? You said that beyond a certain condition, you don't need a license, but under certain condition, yes. Qu'est-ce qu'il a dit par rapport au micro?
Ils disent qu'ils ont un problème avec le micro là, ça ne marche pas bien.
Le technicien là, la wax mom.
C'est ce qu'il a dit.
If it is possible to have the speaker in the audience use a microphone, that would be better. I'm just going to give you one example. We can't interpret because we can't hear the person talking from the audience. The microphone is not working. Now, just to say that we oblige to use this type of solution because we have a long range and the sensors don't give enough data, and behind we have a good autonomy. My question is, as far as ARTP is concerned, are they currently focusing on the LoRa and SIFOC, because we have a lot of initiatives, but it is blocking in terms of regulations and things like that? You need to see the speaker, man. For the case, since last year we wanted to expand the network LoRa, but our request for authorization has no follow-up. I think that we have to seize this opportunity to talk about it. We are committing ourselves to launch ARTP in Africa. Regulation agents should help us facilitate this access. The regulation authority is called on today. I don't have an answer to your question, but on the question of Usman related the technology used in IoT, I'm giving the information. We have a public consultation on IoT, which is open up to November the 30th. Soon it's gonna be closed. So those who have concern, they can give us answers in downloading the document. We have a certain number of questions asked to the stakeholders that are interested by the topic. The other aspect is the request for authorization. I don't have a mastery of the conditions of delivery of those licenses. I can give you a clear-cut answer. And now my question is, do we need a license to use LoRa technology? In fact, it's not a license. It's not a license. It can be I was talking about the legal regimes of in relation to telecommunication. We talk about the activities of big operators in the exploitation of network open to the public networks. This is the regime to which the great operators are submitted to. They need, for example, 4G use specifically bands, license bands, and they are different from those of these bands we're talking about. LoRa is when we get out of the set conditions, we have the current framework. You need an authorization. That's what Mr. Seb was talking about. Maybe his experimentation needs requirements. I'm going to go deeper in the issue. My question is, how, when you have I'm a user, I'm a general user, and I'm said that I have a mechanism that I can buy, which enables me at home to know the temperature in my room from my living room, and which is using LoRa. How do I do to know as a user that this antenna can communicate up to a distance of 10 kilometers, even though my two objects have a distance of 10 meters? How do I know if yes or no I need a license to use that mechanism? Is ARTP who is set? Microphone is not working. The microphone is not working. That LoRa mechanism, is it within the framework of that use, which is guided by law? If you are within that framework, the use is free. Can I continue, please? If you are in that case, for example, the example of a Wi-Fi that we all using at home, but the distance of that Wi-Fi is within a house, is not disturbing anyone. Oh my God. But if your use is within that framework, you don't need authorization. If you go beyond that framework, you do. There is a problem with the microphone. There is a problem with the microphone. That's why my question is, I'm a user and I want to buy. Everything I know is when I want to buy a mechanism, it goes along with a certain number of functionality, but in my legal framework, there are conditions of use that makes me enable me to use it freely in one context and not in another one. I say I have an equipment, I have a device, and I'm a user, simple user. I'm working in my garden, and I have a mechanism which enable me to assess the humidity or the temperature. I'm in my garden, and suddenly I use it at home. I bought it maybe for that use. If it is up to 100 meters, I don't need a particular authorization. I want to do both, but the microphone is not working. What is showing me in my mechanism that beware, up to a certain distance you need an authorization. This is a regulation, but we know that elsewhere we have norms of color, red or green patch. The regulation is one thing, but the sharing of information, we know that we all know about law, but in reality, some people, they don't know about the law. My question is, what am I going to know that beyond this power, I will need an authorization? How do I know from the beginning when I buy it, this object, that in with this such a context, I need an authorization, and in another context, I do not? The case you're talking about is not an isolated one, because most of the time we buy objects. Le micro n'est pas bon. C'est qui le technicien? It would be interesting, for example, what I was talking about is not the principle of license. Just I'm talking about in the position of a final user. And in that respect, I don't do the distinction between using a LoRa or Wi-Fi or Sigfox. I'm not a maker, I'm not a developer of solutions. I bought a kit. There is a user's guide. The position I have now behind, I will have the feeling as a user that I can use certain technology of Bluetooth freely on a short distance, and I don't see the difference using Bluetooth between some centimeters and some meters. To me, it's Bluetooth. It works in anyway. On LoRa, there is a risk that we have users that might have the same problem of conception. I use it within 10 meters, it works, but I realize that when I get away from the sensor, it works also. But I don't know behind, because nothing indicates me that when the sensor go beyond my door, I will need an authorization. It is in this respect that I'm talking about. Now we have various technologies that will have legal incidents, especially on the nature of the data exchanges, as well as on the manner of transferring the information, but also the way of handling it somewhere else. In all cases, we may have different frameworks, but also in relation to the nature of the information. Now, if I take our connected TVs, I buy a TV which is connected using Wi-Fi. I do the setting using my name, my email address, my future search operator. Example, Samsung. Example, I take a TV, and the TV is using my information to the maker. How do I know that those information are transmitted to that maker? What enable me to make the distinction between the devices which transmit information and those who do not do? And they are providing the same services. What in my framework enables me?
Enables me to provide this TV because the information are being handled in a different way or sent in a different way. So the framework that we have right now, the number of 2018 on the transactions, we have the digital communication code, which is being voted today. We have also a law which does not integrate everything recommended by the custom police, but there is actually nothing that can protect us as the end user to make the differentiation between the object in relation to the use, and especially on the transmission of data, especially on the nature of the data which is exchanged, and also all the types of protection that I have in my legal frameworks that can help the user trust the connected object that we have in front of him. And despite all that, other projects are being developed. We have some projects that are about fisheries. We have also a project that are giving information to different fishermen. And we can also make a geo localization of the boat. Even in a broader sense, the different objects are sold anyway. You just have to go into the website online. So I have taken some examples of experts that we have here in Senegal and the Jumia to see that the connected things are being sold freely without describing the risks that we may encounter. So this is the first thing. And also, if we take into consideration the diversity of those objects, there is no mechanism to say that this is the object that can come inside our country, and this is the object that cannot come into our country. Same also in our institutions, in our homes, we buy those objects, we using them, we deploy them, and we don't think about those risks because we just think about the service. So today we are not producing most of them. We don't have companies that are building or that are making those connected things. But however, there are some productions going on. We have people doing integration, other people that are developing some solutions on connected objects. So these are startups who see that there is a lack of service or there is a lack of product that are adapted to our context and that are trying to suggest some solutions. But behind all that, is it all the startups that have that vision, that security vision? Maybe they're just thinking about money and also services. And when we talk about the artisanal, so there is a big concern. Maybe it is due to the level of training. Maybe you need more studies. We have also something which is very recent, just let's say about 5 years ago. That's what we call prototyping. Prototyping. So I'm going to speed up because I don't have time. What we can see that is that in prototyping, there are some institutions that are doing that. So we are producing connected object here, or maybe the ideas, the prototypes or prototypes. So we have the Fab Lab, some publication workshops that are here in the universities. We have some training going on around IoT, and almost everywhere people are talking about IT and telecommunication. And we have most of the time we are talking about a specific module on IoT. The way we teach here is not specialized in IoT, but all that they are doing that. They are talking about that, but they're not specialized on that. We have the Wazat project, which is trying to provide a cloud platform, which is going to enable the different solution developers to have a mechanism which can help them recover some data and then make services and that they can also finance some structures that can develop IoT project. However, we should not forget that these are not the only services that we have. There are some other services that are accessible on internet, on the cloud, abroad, where people can directly send their data to produce their services. We also have some tests in the research centers that are used and that we call the CRE and the equivalent to the Fab Lab, but they're working in a bigger scale. So if I'm talking about all that, is to come back on the conclusion that I started with. IoT in Senegal is a reality. So I'm trying to finish it here. IoT is a reality here in Senegal. We are using it. We're trying to produce it. We're trying to sell it. But we have a problem when it comes to the framework. Thank you very much. Thank you. So we're going to move forward with the presentation of Cathy, who is going to talk about the case of Canada. And as part of this project, two countries are working on the same project or the same problem. We have Canada and Senegal. And given that Canada is much more advanced in the implementation, they had a meeting in July where we attended. So they are here to share with us the multi-stakeholder that they have implemented, the different problems that they have that they are working on. And from there, we will have a source of collaboration in that field. So waiting for Cathy to be set up. So Cathy is working for Internet Society in the North Africa office. And the America office, and she has been part of this project in a very active way. So she is going to talk about the lessons learned from the multi-stakeholder process in Canada. And given that it is the first time in Africa, here in Senegal actually, I would like to welcome her. So she's going to make her presentation in English, so I'm going to ask all of you to use your headsets. So it is a long, you're going to press on the volume to turn it on, and after that you are going to choose which channel. I can't remember, one or two, which should be great, and after that you can increase the volume depending on on your ears, on the sensitiveness of your ears. So it is not a connected object which is going to look your the sensitivity of your ears. Sensitive. So for your information, there is an online streaming of the session. And I think that we have to clarify that. So we have an online streaming. Thank you.
Should I use this one? Or? And I've been working with the group in Canada that's running a very similar process to this one for the last 8 months. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about that process. And to our translators, if I go too fast, please let me know. So as Jowett was saying at the beginning of the day, there are more and more IoT devices coming into the marketplace. And it's hard to keep track of just what the security and privacy risks are on each of those devices, especially as some of the devices that come into the market are very inexpensive. And so the more we connect these devices, the more risk there is for security and privacy, both for users and for the network itself. And so, as I mentioned, what we're doing about it in Canada is encouraging the use of a multi-stakeholder process to solve these complex security issues. So very similar to like we're doing here today, we've been meeting with our larger group for the last 8 months and with a small subset for over a year now to talk about how various stakeholders can actually impact the security of the devices that are coming into the market, specifically in Canada. And we wanted to do this in a multi-stakeholder way for a variety of reasons, but I think primarily when you have a diverse group of voices in the room and a diverse group of opinions looking at complex issues like this, you can find significantly more solutions than any one group would find on its own. So myself with a policy background, I don't understand many of the technological complexities of security, and it's not my job to. In the same way that technologists may not think about the policy implications or the consumer interest implications of the things that they're doing. And it's not necessarily their job to either. But when we all work together, civil society, academia, the government, technologists, we can figure out what each of us knows and how that makes sense as a whole. So there's several characteristics that were really important to the multi-stakeholder process in Canada. And I've listed some of them here and I'll repeat them so you can get the translation in French as well. But I think one of the most important things was in our very first meeting, we asked everyone in the room, what do you think this process should look like? What are the things that make this truly multi-stakeholder to you? And we wrote out a list of norms for that group that said, you know, all stakeholders have equal permission to speak. So meaning every voice in the room is equally important. Stakeholders, though, have to self-identify. If you are from the government, if you're from a company like Google or something like that, or you're from civil society, it's your job to say that so that people know where you're coming from and what your perspective is. Stakeholders also have the ability to self-represent. So you can be represented in the room just as yourself and say, these are my opinions and my thoughts. Or you can come as a member of an organization and say, on behalf of my organization, here's what I think. There's also lack of formal legal procedures. So it's not like we're sitting down every meeting and writing a law. This is a conversation that can be taken in many different ways. And there's also lack of precedent. So no one multi-stakeholder meeting or process has to be exactly the same as another. And the discussion addresses various stakeholders, not just government, which I think for those of you in the room is probably important because you come from many different backgrounds, and that's important. The audience is also a participant. So whether you're physically in the room or participating online, there's an expectation that you're here to give your opinion, and it's important that everyone does. And so a state-based entity, like a government representative, doesn't necessarily have extra status. So again, everyone's voice is equal across the board, and we believe that everyone's opinion is valid. But that brings with it an element of transparency. So both the group as a whole and each individual has to be open about what they're thinking, why they're thinking it, and where they come from. And so the organization is also fluid, but it doesn't lack structure. So anyone's welcome to come at any time. Everyone can take whatever role that they want, but there's still an overarching entity that's planning the meetings and sending out invitations and things like that. So there's someone in charge of those things. And that also is why it's so important to have a process convener. And so in Canada, that's been the Internet Society. We're in charge of, again, sending out the emails, making sure there's a meeting space, making sure there's coffee so that no one falls asleep during those meetings, and doing other important things as well, like helping to set the goals and write the agenda and make sure people are in the room and that they really uphold the list of principles that I just outlined. So then to explain more in depth what's happening in Canada, we formed this process, the Canadian multi-stakeholder process, again, about a year ago, and have been having meetings since last March. And so our approach is, again, really follows the multi-stakeholder process that we outlined, with the added expectation that the stakeholders in the room have a responsibility and an opportunity to actually make the internet safer and more resilient. So there's a mission to it. And that's also been really important because you can feel that sense of urgency in the room where everyone really does want to participate and lend their voice to help do something tangible. And there's that sense of urgency in a collective action setting has been really useful to us because it's made people take more of a role than I think that they would in their everyday life as individuals. Feeling like you're a part of a group that's doing something powerful is really important. And we know that no single person, no single stakeholder can solve this alone, and that the users need to be at the center of the solution. So that's, again, why the collaborative approach is so important and why we've really reached out to civil society as well to make sure that they're there representing public interest. And the bottom-up organic nature of this process has been really helpful in addressing all the existing and potential challenges and issues, again, that no one stakeholder would know on its own. So this whole process has also been voluntary, which I think is important. No one is required to do anything. We haven't made any demands of anybody saying you have to come to every meeting and you have to do this. People are there on their own will, representing both themselves and their organizations, and that also lends a sense of drive to it. We know that everyone in the room really wants to be participating. No one is there because they're forced to be there. And then as one of the outputs from this process, there will be a report which has both the recommendations that the group comes up with and more information about the process itself, because we do think the process is such an important piece of the solution. And it's going to be delivered to the Government of Canada and all the other stakeholders who've been involved. And one of the things that's been most helpful about this process is the fact that the Government of Canada is so closely involved. Having their voice at the table and an accurate representation of what government can and cannot do during the process and as a result of the process is really helpful. And we've really emphasized the need to have a diverse range of stakeholders, especially because we focus on 3 areas that are very different. There's a consumer education piece, a labeling piece, and a network resiliency piece. So again, any one stakeholder won't be an expert in all 3 of those things. So the diversity is crucial. And we also have a diversity of partners on what we're calling the oversight committee. So similar to the convener that I was talking about earlier, these groups are in charge of the organization of the group. So they don't lead the conversations, but they do lead the planning of the meetings and things like that. So we have CIPIC, which is a public interest or civil society group, Canary, which is a more technical group, CIRA, which is the top level domain for Canada, so the .ca group, the Internet Society, and then ISED, which is the Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Department of the Canadian government. And we kind of separated out the stakeholders we targeted into these 4 general categories. We have the research and development community, which is basically academics and government researchers. We have device manufacturers and other private sector individuals. The technical and security community, which is the network operators, research for technical pieces, and then law enforcement. And the internet policy community, which is government, private sector, civil society, anybody focusing on the politics aspect of this. And this is a breakdown of the stakeholders that we've actually been able to get at our meetings. And the vast majority are private enterprise. It's about 1/3 of the room. And depending on which meeting we're having and where we're having it, this graph changes a little. So when we have meetings in Ottawa, which is Canada's center of government, there's a much higher percentage of government individuals involved, versus if we have a meeting in Toronto, there'll be more technical people involved because it's a bigger technical center. But that's part of the reason why we found it's really important to move the meetings around and to have both in-person meetings and virtual meetings, because not everyone from everywhere will come to every meeting. So you have to kind of meet people where they are to make sure that their voices are included. So our process has been pretty similar at each of our meetings. We started with an in-person meeting for a full day, and since then we've done mostly half-day meetings or even shorter meetings of 2 or 3 hours, depending on the stakeholder group we're working with. And in between what we're calling our full group meetings, we have small workshops with targeted stakeholder groups. So at one point we had a youth roundtable to get youth perspectives on the way, so the small workshops target specific stakeholders. When we did our youth workshop, there were probably 20 young individuals looking at how young people interact with devices and also how they view their security. Because it's very different for a young person to look at their security versus someone a little bit older. Young people, especially because they've grown up with the internet, don't expect maybe as much as people who did not. We also have held workshops in different languages. Canada has 2 primary languages, English and French, and then Indigenous languages, particularly in the Northwest Territories. And it's important to capture those voices as well. And then, as I was mentioning, not everyone can come to every meeting depending on where it is. So it's been very important to have virtual roundtables and webinars. And we try and do those about every 2 weeks, but they target a different stakeholder each time. So some are in English, some are in French, some are for youth, some are for technical communities. And then each of our small working groups has their own virtual roundtables as well. We also found one of the most important pieces of this process is the communications aspect between meetings. And we worked really hard to make sure we used communication tools that the people in the room wanted to use. We started by using email and found that not everyone was responsive to listservs. So instead, we now use a platform called Slack, which allows basically for instant messaging. And that's led our general discussion between meetings. At this point, the initiative is focusing on 3 key areas. We have consumer education, labeling, and network resiliency. And each of these groups works independently, but they also collaborate pretty closely because they're all really related. The consumer education group wants to make sure that users are aware of IoT devices and of their security risks, and they want to make a more security conscious public. The labeling group is looking to see how the Canadian marketplace could use or enhance an existing IoT security label. So some kind of a sticker that actually goes on your device to say if it's secure or insecure and to what degree. Then the network resiliency group is focused on the actual risk to the internet networks. And they want to see if there's a way to make the network protected from these devices in Canada. And again, collaborating with Slack and email, the working groups are developing reports on each of these groups. And those reports are in a pretty significant draft stage. We reviewed them last week at a meeting, and the full group made some edits. But we're hoping that those reports will be finished by the end of 2019, and we'll then open them up for public comment. So I'll briefly go through our timeline. Again, we started last January with our oversight committee meeting. And between January and July, we had 2 of our full group meetings and several focus group meetings and online webinars. Then between July and now, we've had 2 more of our full group meetings and significantly more webinars. Not all of them are represented here because honestly, I just ran out of space. But we try and have them pretty frequently. And by the end of February, we'll have 1 condensed report with all the information about the process and the working groups, and then it'll be available for public comment as another way to get more people involved in coming to the meetings. And at the end of March, this process will be, for the large part, closed, and the report will be finished, and we'll make our recommendations to the Canadian government. We have a lot of outputs to date, and I didn't have room on the slide for all of them. So the best way to find them is to go to our initiative website. And this is where all the resources for the Canadian project are, including each working group's draft report. And you're more than welcome to go and look at the working group reports and make comments or suggestions or take information from them as well. We also have published reports on every one of our meetings. And that gives information about who was there, what we talked about, and what the outcomes were, looking at next steps and progress. And then we also have links to all of our webinars, and that includes webinars for the working groups and also kind of our guest webinars, where experts in different aspects of IoT security can come and tell the group about what they're doing. So I wanted to go through a few of the things that each of the working groups are doing now. And again, you can find all of this on the website, and it's available in both English and French. So the consumer awareness group focused on the behaviors and recommendations that should be communicated to consumers, manufacturers, retailers, service providers, government, civil society, and educational institutions. So basically, all the stakeholders involved. How can these messages be communicated to them? And they plan to do 2 different things, 2 outputs as a result of this process. One would be an educational and awareness campaign, and they won't actually carry out the campaign, but they'll make a recommendation about what should be included in that campaign. How would you do it? Especially, as government, as civil society, what is their role? They'll also create a website and repository with information throughout the project and all the relevant links. So that's linking to, because there's so many existing educational movements for IoT and IoT security, it didn't make sense for them to reinvent the wheel. Instead, they'll just target consumers to this site. And then importantly, the scope for this group is just on household and business IoT devices, and that excludes things like cars and smart cities, largely because the consumers that they're targeting are the ones that are actually involved in the buying of these products. And in the first phase, the messages will be for all consumers, regardless of their background, their age, but they are hoping to make more specific and targeted campaigns for young people, elderly people, indigenous people, and others. And the way that they're doing this is through a shared responsibility framework. And I put the tiny URL right there where you can actually see this framework, but it divides it out into the demand side and the supply side. And then under each of those says, you know, here are the key factors that this group needs to think about, and here's what they can actually do. The labeling group is working to figure out what kind of a label would work best in Canada. And there's a lot of questions about what that looks like. But they want to make sure that a certain minimum standard of security would be ensured with this label. And the biggest conversation we had at our most recent meeting was about whether or not you can have a static label or if it needs to be interactive. So for example, if I test a device in June of 2017, and I say, yes, this device is secure, but then a month later, they have a massive security breach. How do consumers know that that device isn't secure anymore, even though I haven't had time to change the label? And one of the things the group came up with was the idea of putting both a static label and a QR code on devices. So that way a consumer can see, okay, when this device was tested, it was secure. And then they can scan the code and see up-to-date information about the status of the security. So they could see any articles about a security breach. They could see if new information has come out, when the device was tested and things like that. And the objective is the safe use of connected devices, especially associated with data streams through clarity about what they do. So the crucial piece is that consumers understand this. If it's hyper technical and really confusing, then it doesn't do anyone any good. So this group is working really closely with the consumer education group because they go hand in hand. Consumers have to both see the label and know what it means and know that there's any reason to have a security label in the first place. And the three key aspects of this label are the content, coverage, and the uniformity. And you can find, again, more information about this group and where they are with their progress using that tiny URL or on our project's website. The network resiliency group is definitely the most technical group. And they're trying to, again, figure out how to keep the internet safe. So as I think Jawat was mentioning earlier, there's a risk to consumers, but there's also a risk to the infrastructure. If you use enough of these IoT devices at the same time to attack a piece of the infrastructure, then there's a risk that you could take down big chunks of website and data online. So this group right now is working most closely on a gateway. So an actual item that would keep IoT devices separated from the internet and allow them to both still work, but not directly impact the networks. And again, you can find more information on the tiny URL. But they'll also have two other outputs, including a white paper about network operation and management guidance, so the technical aspects of IoT, and then a definition of network resiliency, especially one that consumers can understand. Because, you know, if my mom buys some sort of a smartwatch, she's not thinking about how that could impact the internet. And honestly, most of the time, neither am I, because it's not something you directly correlate with the IoT devices. So making that clear is really important. And throughout this process, we've learned a lot of lessons that I think will be helpful to you all. Number one, these processes move slower than you hope they will. It takes a long time to get the right people in the room, having the right conversations and coming up with the right outputs, especially because it's voluntary. No one is here as a part of their job. Everyone is here because they want to be, and they're giving the time that they're able to give. So being patient with the process is really important. It's also really important to identify the stakeholders that are in the room and see who can possibly assist with the outreach to get new stakeholders as well. I know in Canada, every meeting that we've had, we've brought in new people, and every time we do, it's been really helpful and really important. So getting people in an oversight committee who can help you do that is important. And then going to where your stakeholders are and keeping them engaged is also so important. like I was saying earlier with our communications strategy, we started off by using a communication platform that none of our stakeholders used. So it was really difficult to keep people engaged because we weren't using the right tool. So figuring out early on in the process what tools work best for all of you is really helpful. We've also learned that having a good facilitator is really important, and we were really lucky that Andrew Sullivan, who's now the Internet Society CEO, has been our facilitator since the beginning of the process. But he's done a great job, both as a subject matter expert and having experience with the multi-stakeholder process to help guide conversation and ask good questions to people in the room and make sure that we're really hitting every stakeholder group's area of expertise as we go through the process. And similar to the communications platforms, it was really helpful to maintain momentum through the webinars and the small group meetings in between our larger group meetings, so that way there's not chunks of time where we're not meeting all or talking at all. And so I hope that that will be something you all are able to do as well, whether it's virtual or just groups of you meeting in person as you move forward. So I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I know everyone's got to be getting hungry for lunch, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
L'intervention qui est prévue en ligne, mais on a des difficultés. Donc,
we're going to open the list for questions. A lot of things has been said. I think that you feel like to take the floor and give your impressions. We're going to start from here. Merci beaucoup. Je vais intervenir en anglais et dire que je suis très content de la présentation pour une seule raison. Maintenant, au niveau de l'Assemblée, ils sont en train de voter la nouvelle loi sur les télécommunications au Sénégal. Ce qui a été fait par le gouvernement, qui est le ministre de Télécommunications, ils ont invité tous les acteurs clés, la société civile, les opérateurs de télécommunications, presque tout le monde. Et nous sommes en mesure d'avoir une loi qui va donner, qui va définir le secteur de télécommunications pour les années à venir. Ce que vous avez fait au CANEF, on a fait presque quelque chose de similaire avec l'événement d'aujourd'hui et avec l'engagement, l'implication de ISOC. Cela va permettre d'accélérer les choses. Donc, en 3 ans, nous avons fait beaucoup de choses, avoir une loi sur les télécommunications, etc. Et l'autre chose que je voulais ajouter, j'étais au cœur des fournisseurs Internet. Et ce qui se passe au Sénégal est unique au monde pour une simple raison, parce qu'aux États-Unis ou en Europe, le plus souvent, les gens se connectent au boulot ou bien le soir, ils vont chez eux se connecter. Ce n'est pas le cas au Sénégal. Comme un ISP, si les gens sont toujours connectés, s'il n'y a pas de sécurité sur les IoT,
one part that people keep forgetting. They only focus on the security part, the personal issues of people. But as an ISP, when people connect their devices, we are feeling it in a daily basis because it is taking all our bandwidth on a daily basis. Thank you very much.
So your product is really a public product.
Intervene, especially in relation to security of IoTs. You cannot talk about IoT security without talking about norms. International norms and norms in general have played a great role in the security of the system. And today, we're talking about IoT. In Senegal, I want to inform you that we have an institutional framework for normalization. My name is Hassan Beng of Senegalese Association of Normalization, which is a national organization in charge of the national norms, but also in the adoption of international norms that are in line with our digital norms. I want to tell you that ISO is an international organization of normalization. We are a part of members of ISO, and we are taking part to the normalization, especially in the security of IoT. Last August, ISO published an international norm dedicated to security and architecture, normalized architecture of at the international level of IoT. It is a norm setting the framework for application developers to create products and services that are reliable. Product and services that take into account security aspects. And I think that today, as Mr. Mbake said, it's rather for African countries to take part to the normalization at the international level. We should move from simple users of normalization to taking part in the process of normalization. There is a national technical committee which is dedicated to that. It will enable the digital sector to take part to the international normalization, but also to develop national norms in the sector, because nowadays you don't have national norms in the ITs. And this is a gap we should delete, we suppress, allowing experts of the sector to give their voice, to be able to represent their country and be present at the international level in terms of normalization. I'm happy to notice that ISOC is an normalization agency of number one. Of level 1, and experts that are developing international norms at ISO are just the experts that represent national norm organization, and in Senegal is a national organization for normalization which is representing. Thank you. I'm just going to take 15 seconds to say that it would be interesting that if we knew it before, that in this type of meeting that you could do a presentation to present what you're doing, but we know who is there, but we know that we have taken it account. If you are organizing something, we are ready to come and participate, and vice versa. Whenever we have another occasion, we want to give you the necessary flow to get a better understanding of your organization, and the colleagues that are in the sector for many years. Thank you for giving us information about the organization. Here. Thank you. My intervention will be focused on the fact that today in Senegal we have a lot of experimentation trials that are ongoing, how to help these trials, this experimentation to integrate the normalization. But we realized that in France, for some time, it was not possible to commercialize a connected object without norm. Today, we see that Senegal is in the right way. Will it? Don't you think that it's going to be a hindrance for the experience, for the experimentation? What can you do for those who are developing IoT, which is destined to the African market? We will come back on it. Thank you, Mr. Sek. I want to say good morning to everyone, to the panel, starting with the president and all those people who came to Senegal. I think that the topic we are talking about today is of paramount importance, because simply our population must be protected in the same way as our data should be protected against the drawbacks of connected object. Second thing, the main role is up to the state. The state should do a selection of IoT entering the national territory. Third and last, ISOC should play a central role next to the government. Thank you. Thank you. My name is Nazak Gitab, a member of ISOC Senegal. I think that I'm happy about this meeting with the initiative of ISOC to just unveil on what's happening, and which sometimes is considered as something something not that important, but which is very important. But without knowing, we are surrounded by connected objects. In our houses, we have electric counters that are communicating, that are connected objects. So I draw your attention on it because somebody said a while ago that we should reflect today on the issues of the future. I think that it's important that we reflect on the counters that are connected in Senegal and which nobody is talking about. I think that it's important. There should be an awareness rising on those meters, which in near future to communicate on the powers that are diffused and the behavior that is a real issue of individual liberty. I think also, since we're talking about security, the first thing is to protect our perimeter, protect everything that is entering Senegal. Is everything entering Senegal is labelized or labeled? For example, in Senegal, you don't have any communication. Any communication device entering has to follow certain rules. In Senegal, we have objects coming from everywhere. Are those objects secured? Those are issues on which we should ponder on. And today, live box that we all have at home, in certain countries, you oblige to have an access Wi-Fi code. You need to have a code. You have a lot of Wi-Fi, open Wi-Fi, even in the hotels. I think here the regulation should work on issues like that. Thank you very much. I forgot to introduce my name is Madam Sarufina Dab. I'm in charge of communication of ISOC. I would like also as a participant to ask a certain number of questions in relation to the different presentation or interventions that I think are very important. I will start with the first intervention. I think David is in the room. That's not a problem. David said in the beginning in his presentation that the work of ISOC is to have an open internet, secure, globally connected, and reliable. I put question marks on each one of those words, and if we reflect all on about it, is internet open or free? I say no, simply because maybe 90% or 95% of our information are captured by 3 or 4 companies in the world. I want to talk about the GAFAs. All our informations are there. We have to ask the question on the openness of the internet. When the internet was created, if you remember, when we were discussing about the issue between 1992 1996, internet was defined as a set of servers connected. That is to say that is peer-to-peer. Each one was client and server. Nowadays, internet is something which is centralized. There is no doubt. We are just client behind our browsers, and we have access to internet. I was even right now browsing the questions just to see whether internet is open, whether internet is secured or not. That is the issue. What we're doing shows that it's not secured. Is it open? We talked about the free band. We know that it is very expensive. It is reliable. Maybe we're going to say yes. Internet is pretty reliable. It's a resilient protocol, and I think it's something reliable. We can, but nevertheless, we can ask. We can doubt on the openness or the freedom of internet. He ended by saying that she's not the only one to say it. We have to think about the future by design to integrate substantially the new things at the design stage to have less difficulties. And there is the whole debate in Senegal on the openness. I just want to say something. I think somebody said it right in the beginning. In all ways, there is a regulation is always following action. We have to allow action so that we have a regulation. And I think at the level of IoT, what the state and the regulators should do, and I think we're going to keep on keep on delivering the message. We should do the experimentation. If you don't do it, we won't know the problem and the constraint that we have in our country. We did an authorized experimentation. We did an experimentation within 3 years. If I show you the result, you will be stunned. We have we have just one antenna which is set in Boone, and today we know exactly where boats are fishing. If I say where ships are fishing, but also the location where they're fishing. If you look at Guinea-Bissau, people don't see what's happening in Guinea-Bissau. You have hundreds of islands in front of Guinea-Bissau, and they are areas that are protected. And unfortunately, our fishermen go there without authorization. This can have serious diplomatic problems between the two countries. If we have if we systematize, if we have a common system, we can have less problem in that level. We should start from and putting factual in what you're doing. And on the multi-stakeholder process, I just want to say something. Those who follow the issues of strategy, digital Senegal know that for 2 years or more, we have difficulties to set up something that is called the National Council for Digital. It was set with the idea that in Senegal we have a multitude of decision points and a lack of consultation. What has been shown, especially with the experience of Canada, I think that in reality it gives a certain number of points or roads we can use on what can be the National Council of the Digital as collegial tools used by the public in a collegial way. Now, the question I want to ask to Canada is, in reality, which use are you doing? What are the use what is the use made of the recommendation you have issued out, or the one you're going to issue out? Have you assessed the possibility for the state? What are the measures that are going to be state so that the state, the Canadian government, take into account and implement your recommendation that are from a process so open that which is the one you have set up? I just seize the opportunity of my position to ask a question now. Somebody want to ask a question? Angel Idikande from CDP. Just one contribution in relation to Mr. Mbake's presentation, especially for the legal framework. It would be necessary to add one point to the legal framework in relation on law on personal data protection, because it's contributing to that point as regard personal data, especially in the right to information. The people have the right to know who is using the information and what is the objective of those data collection. In addition, we have the access right. The individual can go to the responsible to see and know what are the data that are stored. That we have, the individual has the right to get their data deleted. It's not a law in itself, but is a consciousness that consumers have to take into account. Good morning. My name is Ahmadu Jankan. I'm a representative of SOS Consumers. I would like to thank, first of all, Mrs. Maimuna Job for inviting us to this important workshop, the topic of which is the Senegalese multi-stakeholder process. And we know that the enhancement of the security of IoT has become nowadays a global phenomenon. In fact, all the use all users have access to internet. I just want to come back on the presentation of Mr. David, who stated that ISOC is working for a better internet in order to protect private life and security of people, and citing some guidelines, for example, confidentiality, in order to protect internet against the consumers. Also, I have a question in relation to the, I want to know whether ISOC has worked with CDP or ARTP, who worked a lot on the sensitization actions on the protection of consumers' data. Where are you between ISOC and CDP and ARTP in relation to their collaboration? I want to seize this opportunity to thank ISOC since the time they are here in Senegal. They are doing a remarkable job. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now we're going to maybe give you back the floor so that you try to answer the different questions that have been asked.
Donc, je vais essayer de répondre aux questions et puis je vais essayer de parler doucement. Donc, si j'ai bien compris, vous posez des questions par rapport à comment est-ce que le gouvernement joue un rôle en ce qui concerne les résultats et comment est-ce que le gouvernement utilise ces résultats. Il y a deux points que nous prendre par rapport à cette question. Une des choses les plus importantes de ce processus, c'est le rôle du gouvernement. Le gouvernement a été très impliqué au niveau des rencontres avec les différents acteurs, mais aussi au niveau du groupe de travail, et qui ont contribué en termes d'idées, en termes d'expérience. Et il y a aussi des choses qu'ils peuvent faire par rapport à ces groupes de travail tout au long du projet. Alors, tout un chacun est conscient de ce qui devra être leur rôle, de ce qui devra être leur rôle. Maintenant, à la fin du processus, nous assumons que nous croyons qu'il y aura un rôle pour le gouvernement. On croit que le gouvernement va assurer ce rôle-là, mais c'est très important que tous les acteurs continuent à jouer leur propre rôle parce qu'au finish, ceux qui vont donc créer les objets, et ceci. Tout un chacun, en tout cas, il y aura quelque chose à faire et ils auront déjà discuté de tout ceci en tant que groupe, c'est de voir quel sera leur rôle. Mais du point de vue gouvernemental, ce processus est très important parce que contrairement au gouvernement qui votent des lois ou bien qui annoncent qu'ils ont des édits, des institutions positives ou bien négatives, puisqu'il y a beaucoup de personnes qui sont impliquées, alors il faut qu'ils soient intéressés. Il faut qu'ils soient intéressés dans le processus. Parce que c'est chacun qui est intéressé, donc contribue. C'est ce que
So that's been really helpful. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Merci beaucoup. Je vais répondre peut-être à la question sur le fait que je n'ai pas rajouté la CDP au niveau du cadre légal. C'est dû juste à un petit problème qui est une particularité parce qu'on voit au niveau de l'Internet des objets connectés. Et je vais le présenter par un exemple simple. J'achète une télévision, comme je le disais tout à l'heure, et dans cette télé, je mets mes données. Qui s'est déclaré au niveau de la CDP pour me permettre à moi d'être protégé quand j'utilise cet objet connecté? Le vendeur ne se déclare pas. Celui qui a produit le logiciel qui est intégré à la télé n'est pas déclaré. Le constructeur qui a fait la télé n'est pas déclaré. Et en fait, on a tout un cadre global qui finalement constitue beaucoup plus un système de protection et un frein par rapport à la production d'objets IoT locaux. Parce que si moi, je le fais en tant que Sénégalais et je produis le système d'information localement, je suis obligé de venir me déclarer pour récupérer des données. Mais l'essentiel des objets qui sont actuellement achetés et utilisés ne rentrent pas dans ce cadre parce que le producteur de service, je veux dire, le constructeur ne sont pas locaux et n'ont pas besoin de venir se déclarer. C'est ce qui fait que, en fait, je considère qu'ils ne rentrent pas réellement dans ce cadre-là. Mais effectivement, on aurait pu rajouter la CDP. Mais sinon, personnellement, je préfère considérer que l'utilisateur, pour être extrémiste, n'est pas du tout protégé par la CDP dans le cadre des objets connectés.
Par contre, l'acheteur,
oui. Mais
même s'il soit individuel ou aussi.
L'acheteur, quand l'acheteur ne produit pas le service. Je prends la télé. Celui qui a acheté la télé ne va pas venir à la CDP pour dire j'ai acheté une télé. Celui qui est censé venir se déclarer, c'est celui qui a produit et qui émet le service sur la base du système d'information. Et dans le cadre de ces objets connectés, pour plus de 98% des cas, il n'est pas là.
Je pense que c'est très important de l'intégrer à cette idée, mais à une certaine niveau. Parce que quand on parle d'objets connectés, comme l'exemple de la télé, il y a plusieurs applications qui sont embarquées. À mon avis, c'est des applications qui manipulent des données et c'est le propriétaire de ces applications qui doit être soumis aux obligations de la CDP. Maintenant, derrière, si c'est une startup qui développe une solution IoT avec Big Data, avec la manipulation de données, en ce moment-là, on doit se rapprocher de la CDP pour respecter les normes en Et il faut qu'on fasse attention à la CDP, parce qu'aujourd'hui, on sent souvent des réticences à développer certaines choses, parce que dès qu'on commence à manipuler des données, on fait attention à cette là, attention à la là. Et pour une expérimentation, pour laisser les gens toucher à la matière et développer des choses intéressantes, il faut que ce cadre-là soit bien défini, bien compris par les autres. Merci.
Vous avez vraiment beaucoup parlé, il y a beaucoup de choses très, très importantes ici. Et je pense que le débat va être intéressant.
Bonjour tout le monde, merci de
the fact that CDP is reluctant to do something. I work for CDP. I have to say that CDP is not a breakthrough technological intervention, but we are here just to supervise. This is something that you should have in mind. And to come back also on the question that was asked a bit earlier, everybody or any structure that defines the means and the ends, they are considered when it comes to the law as in charge of process. So it is not only a structure is going to design an application in the define and so on, but the finalities of that application should be declared in CDP. So our law has been here for 10 years now, and it is not in line with the technical evolution. That is the reason why at the level of CDP, we have started a reflection to revise the law so that we can better be online with the technological progress. We are talking about IoT, and that is the reason why we have decided to revise that law. And you all know here that to revise the law takes a lot of time, and there is some amount of time which is needed for the process to be applied. The other contribution that I wanted to make was to say thanks to the initiative of ISAC for these connected objects. So we have to make some anticipation to prevent the risk. We have the use of Internet of Things in the world, as was said in the first presentation. And by 2020, there might be 50 billion objects connected, which shows the importance of those objects in our lives, but also the risk it can represent for the people. Yes, we believe in the protection of data, We can buy a watch, which can seem just a simple watch, but the risk on our private life, on our possibilities to go and come and so on. So there are some risks. That's the way I'm getting into. So it is important to have these type of debates so that we can anticipate on those risks and threats that can be very important in our countries, but also at the global level. On behalf of the president, we just would like to say thanks to Isaac for that approach, which is trying to bring all the stakeholders that are involved in these issues. So for me, personally speaking, that's what I want to say, that today in Senegal, what we are lacking is the coordination between the different actors that handle that security aspect, and especially the security of connected aspect. We have talked about labeling, as Mr. Mbake said, the custom police have a role to play, but there should be a body which should supervise the different activities so that it can be much, so that we can have a better coordination of all these. Thank you, sir. I think that what you are saying should be taken on board, that normalization, CDP, ARTP, and so on. So there are many state organizations and non-state organizations. So there is a common concern, and that those regulatory bodies have to work together. So we have to focus on that coordination aspect, which is really important. Good morning, everybody. My name is Modu Jufus, and I work at the Directorate of Information of ICAT. To talk about this problem, I just wanted to say that nowadays, it's true that we're talking about the security of Internet of things, but today here in Senegal, we know that when it comes to the traffic of internet in Senegal, or internet traffic in Senegal, do we have a full control of our data? Do we have a full control of our data? We know that most of our data are abroad. They are anywhere on the internet. So we don't have anything internally which can contain our data inside. Like if I'm on Espresso and I want to talk with someone on Sanatel, I have to go out on internet and come back. So for more security, don't we have to better control the internal traffic in Senegal? Like if you are inside the country and you want to communicate with someone which is internally, you should not go out of that channel. And today also our government today, can they help save some data? Like, can your operator help you save your data? That's the regulation. Enable them to do that, to help you save or protect your data. Let me thank you for that question between to communicate to Shekua. It is a very complicated problem, but it is very good to ask it. Thank you. I have seen the impact of CDP on the Internet of Things by putting in place a project by Senelec, and which is a smart meter. The smart meter that is used by the Senegalese power grid. So that is something which is really important. And they were invited. We were invited so that we can think about a project to put in place a smart meter. But the problem was that the data could not be hosted here in Senegal. It had to go from another platform on a company which is in France and then the project was blocked by CDP because CDP could not accept for the data to go to France before they copy them, and then from there they send them to Senegal. The other question is that there are many initiatives on the connected object that people don't know. I have trained more than 80 students, and most of them are working on the IoT things and are using some monitoring platforms. They cannot have they don't have the competence to have the solutions to go to CDP and to tell them that we have an application which can help us launch this thing or that. Because for them, it is not something which is directly a problem to them. And most of the time, they use those Microsoft platforms or Amazon platforms or even IBM or some where they can deploy the solution and they have some or give some services behind. So there should be a awareness raising system to talk about those actors who are developing those platforms to show them what the CDP can accept, because we are using some personal data that are being loaded into those platforms. What does CDP, what CDP think about that? What CDP says about that? So many questions that were asked, but I can't help saying that we have to be realistic. Each of us, individually speaking, we are using a Gmail or a mail account where all the data are abroad or outside. So we have to talk about our personal data, but we have to say that our personal data they are all outside. So it is the technology which is imposing that.
The issue is how to secure the data. But the problem of the physical localization, we have to tackle it differently. We are part of the world, and the data will go outside. So they want to be 100% here. In fact, it was just to contribute in relation to the person who was talking about the communication between operators getting out of Senegal and coming back, just to inform him that we have the CEMIC, which is available right now in Senegal, who is enabling the data not to get out of Senegal to come back. I can tell you, as the director of operation of World Telecom, who is a internet provider, it helps us if we want any Senegal who go to a server to be hosted by one of the operators to use our internet to it was expensive for us. It is a problem that we are experiencing as providers. The other contribution is in relation to the equipment or the devices entering Senegal. As a provider, all telecom devices, the radio CPL, we are obliged to accept them before custom officers let them enter. Now, the problem that we have now, the connected object, we're going out, we go to the US, we go to other country, and we bring it back home here. And as somebody said it, if I have a watch, the custom officers, they will not check it. So I come back with it, and most of the time there is a problem. Simple example, at a certain moment we wanted to do a test on a radio station with RTE. We used a device which was homologued, but unfortunately there was a problem because the power was not set. The device was certified, but there was not a proper setting of the device. Sometimes we certified, but we don't have enough information in as regard the drawbacks of the device. Thank you very much. Oh, just one sentence to add. when we are talking about data center in Sanatel, which is a center available to concentrate everything related to data. Thank you very much. I think that we're going to give back the floor to David. If David, you are ready. What are you going to do, Maimuna? David has been called on different questions. He's going to try to answer. I was trying to connect and play the video, which is interesting, but I can try to answer the question before we get the computer connected. It's not a problem. I think we can show it tomorrow. Can you remind me the question, please? Tijan asked a question on the mission of ZOC. Next to each mission to get the internet open, secured. In all cases, as for any vision, we don't have solutions to get to that objective. It's not simply in Senegal. It's not just in Senegal. It's complicated everywhere. And this is not a reason not to do it. I remind you that when we were saying some years ago, internet for everyone, some people was laughing about it. But because internet was just for a limited number of people in Africa, so that objective was far away. Nowadays things have improved because we have new technologies that help us. There is also political leaders who think that this is something important, something that is feasible. I remember 10 or 15 years ago, for many government, internet was something luxurious. I don't think that nowadays there is a government still saying that. Even some countries are saying that it's right. So things have changed. If we find out that it's a difficult problem, and I think in the future things will improve. Everywhere there is a problem, there are opportunities, and we need to consider it. Even in Senegal, we shouldn't be those who are waiting for the solution coming from outside. We need to be part of the solution, which will bring us advantages. I tried to answer the question, but I think I can't answer all the questions. Thank you, David. I think that's it. That's the role of ISOC, is to help all the stakeholders to be able to communicate, to sit down together and to be aware of the evolution, because they play a major role in the definition of norms, but also a role of facilitator so that people have access to these new technologies. I would like, before to conclude, to thank all the panelists who did brilliant presentation, but also the audience who participates. If we had to do it again, I would plan it differently if I had confirmation before. But this is, we will have another opportunity. This is we are at the beginning of the process. We will have, as Canada did, working groups. We will have a more extended meeting, and I think tomorrow we'll have a global, a wider presentation of the project. And there also, we are expecting from you input. Once more, in internet society, we don't have the solution. We are looking for the solution. Everyone should feel implicated, and we are lucky because we are in an open world, and each one should feel implicated and commit themselves and give something for the community. I just wanted to thank all the participants and apologize of the ministry who for major reason could not make it here. The same for the president of CDP. And to thank the Prime Minister office who will be here tomorrow. Thank also our host who made it here today. I would particularly to thank ISOC Senegal, but also its members for their contribution, their time. We're doing this in a benevolent way. And I think with association of the normalization, we have started exchanging, and we will have many things to share. It's the same for all youth that are in this domain of IoT. We are in a discovery method, and we should keep on sharing that discovery. I'm the only person between you and Ropa, and I think of the lunch. I think we not just at the time we want to go for lunch. We're going to watch the video, and after that we will conclude. And let's follow the video. 1 second. Why this video is just to show you that in Senegal is not less in advance than the rest of the world. There is a reporter who went to the street to ask what I think it's in the US, and you will see that the answers are not very different from what you can expect from Senegal.
Donc, ils ne sont pas plus avancés ailleurs. Donc, il ne faut pas avoir de complexe pour discuter sur la sécurité de l'humanité. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. Sur ce, vous invite à déjeuner. Et rendez-vous demain à 9h pour la cérémonie officielle avec les visiteurs. Merci beaucoup.